We know sharks are out there. We know attacks do happen, but it will never happen to us until it does. Here are 3 devastating shark attacks that sent shockwaves through communities and made headlines around the world. Hit like and subscribe. This is Fierce. 37-year-old Stephen Payne was on the trip of a lifetime. The New Zealander was traveling around Australia in a caravan for 6 months with his girlfriend and their dog, Poppy. He was an adventurous man, enjoying the great outdoors, once having lived in Namibia, and always a keen surfer. His school friends described him as an exceptional rugby player, an athletic man who they could always count on. But on March 10, 2025, the couple decided to make a stop on the south coast. They pulled off the main highway and headed for Wharton Beach, near Esperance, Western Australia. It was a decision that would change their lives forever. Stephen had been with his girlfriend for 12 years. They shared a love for the ocean. They had been diving with sharks before, an unforgettable experience, but surfing was Stephen's favorite hobby. Only a week earlier, he had caught the wave of his life, sharing the moment with a dolphin just feet from his surfboard. It was something he said he'd never forget. But this time, as he paddled out from the shore, it wasn't a dolphin in the water with him. Unbeknown to the 6'4" volunteer firefighter, there was something deadly heading his way. He sat on his board, bobbing up and down in the waves just 30 feet from shore. He was in chest-high water alongside 2 other surfers. His girlfriend watched on from the beach when suddenly Stephen was thrown off his board. It was as though he had been hit by a truck. Something had struck the underside of his board, and when he hit back down into the ocean, he felt the terrifying jaws of an enormous shark grab him around the waist. Stephen screamed for help. Everybody on the beach heard the cry. A terrifyingly huge dorsal fin arched out of the water where Stephen had been seconds before. Panic set in as the surfers and nearby swimmers rushed for the shore. When Stephen's girlfriend leapt to her feet, she shielded her eyes against the glare of the sun, but couldn't see Stephen. He had disappeared from sight, vanished beneath the waves. This scene was all too familiar for Australians. The previous year, there had been 9 unprovoked shark attacks, and now, as the search team scoured the water for Stephen, any hope of finding him faded. At the time of making this video, tragically, Stephen's body still hasn't been found. It's not just those at the surface who are at risk of shark attacks. Divers can become victims too, as they sink into the murky depths of shark territory. 57-year-old Eduard Periguden was on vacation in the Philippines with his 2 sons, 18-year-old Timothy and 29-year-old Ilya. On February 27, 2025, they visited the main island of Luzon and headed for the Batangas resort area. The 3 of them had booked onto a scuba diving adventure. It promised to be a trip of a lifetime, but it ended up being something completely unexpected. The Perigudens were joined by another man, 39-year-old Maxim Melikov. All 4 were Russian and were eager to get into the water. Led by their dive instructor, they headed out in the boat. The weather was fine. The sea was relatively calm, but beneath the surface, it was a whole different story. As the group of 5 descended downwards, they had to keep kicking as they could feel the pull from the underwater currents. Engulfed by the underwater world, the tourists marveled at the sights all around them. Diving in the Philippines didn't disappoint, at least not at first. When they were around half an hour into the dive, they felt the tug from the currents once more. It was suddenly incredibly powerful, and the dive instructor looked back to see Ilya and Maxime disappearing into the underwater gloom. The current had torn the group in 2, and the instructor signaled for Eduard and Timothy to head for the surface. The situation was getting out of hand. But the trouble wasn't over yet for Ilya and Maxime. Unable to get back to the others, they were pulled further and further away, unable to fight the current. But they weren't alone down there. They were being hunted by something. A shark was patrolling the waters. Always on the lookout for an easy meal, the predator had sensed the diver's fear and swam closer to investigate. Back at the surface, the others had climbed back into the boat, and the Filipino instructor had called the Coast Guard. Within minutes, they were on the scene and began searching for the two missing divers. But just 4 minutes into the search, they spotted something terrifying. A shark was tugging at the body of Ilya. It had ripped his arm off and was now tucking in to the rest, tearing flesh from bone. It was a devastating sight, and it was difficult for the rescuers to retrieve the body. It took them around an hour to pull Ilya from the water. 20 minutes later, they found Maxime floating, unconscious near the shore. He was rushed to the hospital, but was tragically pronounced dead on arrival. It was a devastating end to an adventure that should have been the highlight of their holiday. The next attack is one of the most horrific imaginable. It was a warm Sunday afternoon, June 3, 2018, on Brazil's northeast coast. 18-year-old Jose Ernestor de Silva headed down to his local beach with his brother Ezekiel and their friends. But it was forbidden. Their mother had warned them not to swim in the waters. Just a few weeks before, on April 15th, 35-year-old Pablo de Mello was attacked by a shark while swimming off of Piedade Beach. He had lost a leg and a hand in the ordeal. The attack had terrified Jose's mother, so the two boys would sneak down to the beach without telling her. But this time, they should have listened. As the group of friends jumped up and down in the surf, chatting and swimming and messing about, a tiger shark was prowling beneath the waves. Hundreds of other people were enjoying the water at the time, but Jose and Ezekiel were swimming quite far out. They were in deep water. Back on the beach, there were warning signs about sharks. But it would never happen to them, right? The group looked up as lifeguards blew their whistles. They signaled for the youngsters to come in closer to the shore as they were being pulled with the currents and getting deeper and deeper, further and further out. At that precise moment, there was an enormous splash, and Jose was pulled under the water. The lifeguards rushed into the sea as Jose bobbed back up, screaming. He had been bitten by the tiger shark. It had taken a devastating bite and then swum away instantly. The lifeguards dragged him from the shallows and up onto the sand. Then came the shocking realization of the damage the shark had done. It had not only bitten a large chunk out of Jose's inner thigh, but it had also severed his penis. Jose was loaded up into an ambulance. He was rushed to the local Aeronautica hospital. He suffered a heart attack en route, but was brought back around. He was then transported to the Restauration Hospital in the center of Recife, where he suffered a second heart attack. He received blood on arrival and underwent 3 hours of surgery. But sadly, once in intensive care, the 18-year-old died from hypovolemic shock.